Kristiaan Borreti, just very briefly about his background and then for a short introduction. He's a bouwmeester, or the master architect of Brussels Capital Region in Belgium. Before that position, he was the bouwmeester of Antwerp, and he's also been dean of the Faculty of Design Sciences at the University of Antwerp. He's professor of urban design at Ghent University already since 2005. In his professional career, he's been alternating between theory and practice, between design and policy, between architecture and urbanism. He participated in interdisciplinary research on contemporary transformations of the city and public space, and contributed to various urban design projects in Belgium, Netherlands, and France. His education is actually in engineering and architecture, and he also obtained additional diplomas in philosophy, in political science and public affairs, and he's also a master in urbanism. At Ghent University, he participated in GUST, which means Ghent Urban Studies Team, an interdisciplinary research project on contemporary transformations of the city and the urban public space. He publishes regularly in journals and other media. He's board member of the Flemish Architecture Institute and of the Belgian Architectural Review A+. He's also member of the International Scientific Committee of Europan. In 2013, he was awarded the Flemish Culture Award for Architecture 2012-2013. Please join me welcoming Kristiaan Borreti. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. They want me to be on the podium, but I resist because it gives me not feeling. So, but if I think I'm visible for everyone, and so that it's not necessary to go on the podium. So, thanks for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. For me, it's my first time ever in Tallinn, and I'm discovering a city with a lot of contrasts, you could say, of course, you know, because you have several neighborhoods that are really morphologically totally different and then clash together at certain points in the city. It reminds me a bit of Brussels, where things are not smooth and harmonious and so on. But we will discuss about that. I will bring you three parts. The first part is about what is this bouwmeester job. So it's a bit about policy and architectural policy, about administration and so on. It means it's a lot of text. And because I'm an architect and because you are mostly architects, you want to see some images too. So I've added a part on what I've been doing in Antwerp and what's happening now in Brussels. And then I will end up, if we have enough time, with a bit more a perspective point, which is in fact the title of my presentation, which is the productive city. So how can we conceive of the city today, not just as the place of housing, not just as the place of offices, not just the place of retail, consumption, entertainment and culture, but also a place of production, manufacturing things in town, like it was done before here, and like it is in many cases replaced now by cultural institutions. First thing, a bouwmeester, which is a Dutch word, which is translated in French like maître architecte, which is difficult to translate in English because if you could say city architect, but in fact in many cases the bouwmeester is not a city architect in the traditional sense. I mean, the bouwmeester is not the head of the department of architecture in a city. The bouwmeester is not the one in a city that is responsible for the building permits, the head of the administration. The bouwmeester is not a political person. So it's not the one in the government that is responsible for urban policy. So it's a lot of things not, So what is it in fact? So it's something hybrid, so it's perhaps not too easy to explain, but I'll do, of course, an effort. So if you would summarize it in one sentence, then it is the bouwmeester supervises the quality of architecture and city development projects, in this case in Brussels, from an independent position. If we deconstruct this, so supervise has the sound like, is a bit like controlling. In the office, we often joke that we are the police of architecture. So if someone is doing something ugly, then the bouwmeester intervenes. So it's a joke because we want to avoid it. In some cases, it's like that. But in the best cases, you should try to intervene in order to improve architectural quality of buildings, really in the earliest stage of the process, because then it's more useful. If you do it at the end, just before the building permit, or at the moment of the building permit, everyone is angry. The architect is angry because he has done already a lot of work. The client, or the developer, is angry because he has already invested a lot of money. The government is angry because now we were really there and now it will take extra time. And me, myself, I'm angry too because I have the idea that everything is already decided and I cannot discuss anymore. So you have to try to intervene as early as possible. So that's why I try to replace supervise by positive words, initiate, stimulate, control with, plead, convince, and so on. So a bouwmeester is really is trying to anticipate, while normally the city administration is focusing on the moment of decision, the moment of giving the building permit. Spatial quality, so not just it's spatial quality of architecture and city development. So I'm not just working on architecture, I'm also working on projects of urban planning, of public infrastructure, road infrastructure, public space, landscape design, and so on. Brussels, so it's in theory, about all projects on the territory of, in this case, Brussels Capital Region. That means public projects, but also private projects. Of course, there is a kind of spontaneous selection that only the strategic projects are really taken care of. Strategic means the large ones, or sometimes a smaller project, but on a very crucial spot. So it depends. There is not just one definition. Brussels Capital Region, I won't bother you with explaining the Belgian is on the level of the institutions, the regions, the cities, the national level. It's very complicated. If I would explain it and you would have understood it, that means that I've explained it wrongly, because you're not supposed to be able to understand. It's that much complex. So, but in the case of Brussels, I'm a bouwmeester at a regional level, but the region of Brussels is more or less like a city. It's a special region. It's a kind of city region, in the same way as Hamburg is a city region. And the last point is in fact the most important point. So the bouwmeester, and that makes the big difference between a bouwmeester and other city officials. The bouwmeester is acting from an independent position. So he's not in the administration, he's not above the administration, he's besides the administration, and he's directly accountable to the government. So you are independent. A city official, the administration, is supposed to execute what the government decides. That's the role. The bouwmeester, in a way, doesn't have to obey. I can criticize the government publicly in the newspaper, if I want to. I'm even paid to do that by them. But on the other hand, this independence I'm the first one to say that it's very important, but also to make it a bit more relative, to see it more in a nuanced way. Because as a bouwmeester, I think you have make use of this independent position, you really can take profit of it. But at the same time, it's a kind of equilibrium you have to strive for. So it's a bit like walking on a rope. And sometimes you fall, and then it's wrong, but then you climb up again and you go on. And you could say that there are two extremes. One extreme is that you're never critical, then that you're always kind and gentle and so on. In fact, then you're just there for decoration. You're a kind of flower pot. The government perhaps would like that we have a bouwmeester, we have it, but he's not annoying us, so it's no problem. Then you should ask yourself, yeah, why did you want to become a bouwmeester? Because that's not the role. So that means if you're never critical, you're useless as a bouwmeester. But there is another extreme, that is when you're always critical on everything, and especially continuously in the media. So if you're exposing all of the time, things are not good, the government is taking wrong decisions, and so on, so on. Then in the beginning, it gives you a good feeling because, hey, look at me, what I dare to say. But in the end, you become useless because you will lose impact. Because after some time, they will try to put you aside. They won't invite you to join in projects. They will cut your wings. And in fact, you lose the opportunity you have in this position to have real impact. So that's why, as a bouwmeester, sometimes you have to deliberately, intentionally, to choose to act behind the screens and to try to influence in a discreet way instead of doing it all of the time in the media. And so, in between those two extremes of being useless, you can be useful, somewhere in between, depends. Some practical things. So a bouwmeester is appointed per mandate of 5 years. Sometimes it can be renewed, sometimes not. It's not very clear. The appointment is by means of a public procedure. So you have to be a candidate, and then there's a jury, and there's a lot of tests, and so on. So it's not a political appointment. It's a main job, so I'm nearly full-time. I'm teaching at Ghent University. I'm not anymore working as a dean of the university in Antwerp, so that was in between. So you can't combine too many things. It's nearly a full-time job. And the bouwmeester is not a person, the bouwmeester is a team. In my case, there is now a team of 13 people working with me. In Belgium, in the innocent year 0, there were no bouwmeesters. All private developers were very happy. Then in 1999, it was decided that in Flanders there will be a regional bouwmeester, a state architect. So something like 16 years ago now, but not quite recent, in fact. Then in 2000, the city of Antwerp decided to do the same thing. So the bouwmeester on the level of the city. In 2007, you had more or less the same thing in Wallonia. It's hatched because there is someone taking care of the quality of the public projects by the public authority of Wallonia, but not really in this kind of independent position. So it's more like a civil servant. In 2009, and there is a mistake in the drawing, but you won't see it because you don't know everything about Belgium. So Charleroi is in the south of Belgium. There was a bouwmeester appointed in Charleroi, in the French-speaking part of Belgium. The funny thing is that the official name in French, in this case, is bouwmeester, or in French, bouwmeester. It's pronounced slightly different. But that's a Dutch word entering the French language. It's quite, in our country, about, of course, about this friction between the two languages. I love this kind of transfers. And then in Brussels, it was created in 2013. So I'm the second bouwmeester. My predecessor was Olivier Bastin. It's always more easy to be the second one because the first one created the position. And in 2017, they will appoint a bouwmeester in Ghent, a smaller city in Flanders. That means a city of something like 250,000 inhabitants. So that means If Ghent can afford a Bouwmeester, Tallinn can afford a Bouwmeester too, because Tallinn is bigger than Ghent. So you see in Belgium it's quite spreading. There are similar jobs, not always the same thing in the Netherlands, in some German and Swiss cities. They told me there is a Bouwmeester in Moscow, but I don't know if that will help you to be convinced. But in many cities in Europe now you have this kind of job. In practice, what are the core tasks? The first one is very visible, so that's more or less 50% of my job. That's organizing competitions. So I will tell you more about it. And so that's why we have so many people in the team, because it's indeed an entire machinery to organize good competitions. It's public, and so it's rather well known. The rest of the job, more or less 50% of the job, is more discreet. It's not so well known. And as I explained to you, in fact, sometimes on purpose. So it's advising on policy and coaching the administration to specific aspects. And then the last one is quite general. It's what I'm doing now. I'm the salesman of Bouwmeester. So I'm promoting cultural awareness for architecture and city development. Organizing competitions. So there we have some general rules. We organize competitions for public authorities, for several departments, housing department, social housing department, schools, school buildings, but also public space works, roads, metro stations, all these kind of things, and urbanistic master plans. So you have the European legislation about public tendering that has to be followed. What we do is we add some extra conditions so that we transform this, let's say, pure legal public tendering into a competition. What we make a plea for in the really beginning of the competition to have a clear definition of the program, the budget and the fee. So the fee normally, what we prefer is fixed, so that from the beginning we say, well, for this building, you as an architect, you will have 12% fee. So that means no discussion anymore. And also that afterwards in the competition, when we compare the projects by several architects, the fee is not an element of the comparison. So it's only about the quality of the project. We also want that the client makes an effort to define what he wants, because an architect has to give an answer to the question. If the question is not clear, then the architect cannot give a good answer. So that's the hardest part of the job, to convince the client to make a good reflection, to write down something more than one page to explain the project, to express his ambitions. What does he want? Why does he want? What is, in this case, the accent he wants to have from the architect? Second point, we only do competitions in 2 steps. So that means there's first a public call, who wants to participate. Architects apply, just with a portfolio, some references, and then we select together with the client 3 or 5 candidates, architects, and we ask them to make a proposal. So only those people really have to do an effort. The other ones, because we want to avoid that every architect has to work for free and do proposals while they are not paid for it. So these 3 to 5 architects or candidates, might be urban planners too, so they can make a proposal and they can do that in good conditions. That means they have enough time, minimum 2 months, 1 month and a half, something like that, and they're paid for it. They're paid for the competition work. Secondly, they have the opportunity to present orally, to explain the project, so the juries don't just read the project proposal, but there is a kind of interchange with the jury, and the jury is professionally composed. So there are enough architects in the jury, not just politicians, for instance. So I told you about the criteria. So because the fee was evacuated in the beginning because it's fixed, it doesn't make part anymore of the criteria on which we base ourselves to make the decision. So it's really, in the ideal case, it's only about quality. Sometimes there is still a criterion about the financial aspects. For instance, about the budget and so on. But it's always a minor criterion, something like 10 or to 20% of the points. And then afterwards, there is a transparent decision process, and there is a report that is available for the public. So everything is open and transparent. So that's what we believe in and what we try to convince each time the clients in Belgium. It works quite well, not always, but I'm here to tell you that it's successful. So I will put the emphasis on the fact that it works quite well, but of course there are always minor discussions and it doesn't end up always in an ideal way. So we organize something like at least 30 competitions per year for all kind of projects, from smaller kindergarten, for instance, to there was a project with a private developer for 80,000 square meters of housing, so 800 dwellings. So we will organize a competition soon for a new museum in collaboration with the Centre Pompidou. So sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. I think both aspects are important. I think we should have good architecture, of course, for the major programs in the city, but also for the daily life projects, for a kindergarten, for a school. We've been organizing competitions, for instance, recently for a container park, so where you go to throw away your waste. So even these kind of public amenities, they deserve some quality of architecture, quality of use, in fact. There is a lot of work advising on policy, coaching the administrations, so not just working on concrete projects, but also on general policies. For instance, here in Antwerp, as a bouwmeester, I worked on a high-rise, division of a high-rise plan in the city, or I proposed a pioneering study of what you could call the 20th century belt of the city. So we have a lot of urban renovation in the inner city and in the 19th century belt. I think it's useful now in Belgium to start also the urban renewal of this 20th century belt. We do a lot of research by design. That means in my team there are 3 people who are drawing themselves or making proposals, because I think it is necessary that our means as architects, as designers, is the drawing, is the map, is graphics. It's not just texts and words and Excel tables. It's also an image, and that is drawing this image should be part of the debate. So I hate it when there is a meeting about an urban project and there is no map in the middle, or there are no images. So that's why in my team we have people that are exploring, for instance, possibilities of development in an area. There's a lot of work ahead of the building permit, and there is this kind of promoting cultural awareness. So that's why I'm very proud that me and my team were awarded in 2013 the Cultural Prize of the government of that year for architecture, a kind of recognition that this kind of bouwmeester work has a cultural value too. So that it's not just about planning or real estate economics. No, it's about culture too. Antwerp. I've worked 8 years in Antwerp. Antwerp is a city in the northern part of Belgium, so port city along the Scheldt, second port in Europe after Rotterdam. 500,000 inhabitants, something like 200 square kilometers. Very pleasant city, quite rich city too. One project that I will be telling you about is over here, the Eilandje, so this is the city center, the sea is over there, and so the port is moving downstream the river, closer and closer to the sea, as in many places. So that means the 18th and 9th century port, Eilandje, has become obsolete and looked like that in the 1980s, so empty warehouses, no real port activity anymore, waiting for a new future. So of course, as in many port cities in Europe, it became a new urban neighborhood, waterfront redevelopment, like in Hamburg, Haven City, like in Rotterdam, Kop van Zuid, like in many cities. In 1993, there was a competition for a master plan. It was Manuel de Sola Morales, Barcelona professor of urban planning. I studied with him. So he was my teacher at those times. So he made a plan in Antwerp to provide a kind of access like that, which links the Eilandje, the harbor area, to the historical city in the south. Main point is here to build a cultural program that makes the hinge, that connects both. This is 1993, an ideas competition organized by the local Association of Architects, organized within the program of the cultural capital, like Tallinn has been cultural capital, Antwerp was cultural capital of Europe in 1993. So not organized by the official city, so kind of bottom-up proposal. But then later on it was picked up by the city, taken over and integrated in the official urban policy of the city. In 2000, it was redone as a master plan, a full master plan for the entire area by my predecessor in Antwerp, René Daniels, a Dutch urban planner. So we made a model, and in the meantime, this is how it will look like when everything is finished. In the meantime, we've already modified, changed the models at least 5 times. And so for me, that's a proof that this kind of master planning, where you make a master plan and then you wait 20 years until everything will be realized like the master plan said at the beginning, that this kind of vision is an illusion, that it doesn't work like that anymore, that you have to make much more flexible master plans, which are flexible because everything changes, but on the other side, you have to take care of that some of the crucial elements of the master plan are really very clear, defined, and that you stick to them. Because otherwise, if you have too much flexibility, you have nothing anymore. So you have to make a kind of distinction between what is hard and soft, what can change and what is unchangeable. And so that's why, in fact, we worked after a while, we didn't work with that model anymore, but we worked with a set of 6 beeldkwaliteitsplannen, so more texts and more suggestive documents with drawings and so on, what is the essential quality we want, so that they were more suggesting a direction instead of really imposing very strictly how it should be developed. In 2011, that cultural program I told you about that should make the link between the harbor area and the city center was built. It's a museum about Antwerp, in fact, a city museum. It was built by a Dutch architect, Neuteling Striedijk. It has become an iconic building for Antwerp. So all people in Belgium associate Antwerp partly with the cathedral, Gothic cathedral, but also partly with this building. So it's been very successful. On the other hand, things went slowly. So you have the historic city center here. You have this museum building, and then first 2 of a row of 6 towers that were intended to be built along this dock. If this would have been the Netherlands, it would have been built in 5 years, everything. Because they have big contractors big development machinery in those golden years before the real estate crisis. And so we were very jealous at that time, because in Belgium we have another kind of market. We small-scale market, building piece by piece, small developers, small contractors. Things were going slowly. And we were jealous about the Netherlands, where everything went very quickly, until 2008, because then it was crisis, everything collapsed, nothing happened in the Netherlands anymore, or in London Docklands, or and so on. But we kept on building, because this kind of small-scale market, real estate market, is less fragile, in fact, is less influenced by this kind of global evolutions. So we kept on building, and they were jealous about us. And then we realized, in fact, this Belgian way, small-scale way of making cities is not bad at all. It's not a problem. It's an advantage. It's our success. Firstly, economically, because we keep on building. But secondly, because at the end, our new neighborhoods, they are more rich. They are more organic grown. There's more diverse architecture. It's not just built in 5 years, one style, one idea, one concept, and put on the market. No. As I've told you, we've been changing the models the model many times. We've been changing the program many times because it didn't work, or because the market changed, or there was a contractor who went bankrupt, and then there was a new mayor, and now I'm not working there anymore. Just some other things will change. But all these kind of things that are seen as a problem, in fact, are creating more layers in the neighborhood. And so and at the end, the neighborhood looks as if it's already historical. It's more rich, it's less uniform, it's less monodimensional. And so that's why we decided now we give it a name. So it's slow urbanism, like in slow food. You take your time to make a good Italian sauce with good local ingredients, not importing from China or whatever. You take your time, and then at the end, it's better quality. So this kind of slow urbanism, that's what we make a plea for. Slow urbanism was a strategy. So at a certain moment, we decided in Antwerp, or they decided in Antwerp, to have temporarily a swimming pool ship, so a ship that is in the water, but that is a swimming pool. Why a ship? Because we could move it. Why a swimming pool? Because we need an open-air swimming pool. But in fact, the main reason is to attract the people living in the city to the outskirts of that area, where normally they don't come. But that helps them to discover the area, so that the day we start building housing there, they already know the area. So that there is a kind of commitment. And so that we add a kind of layer of knowledge. So this kind of taking your time and preparing the future development by temporary interventions, that kind of slow urbanism really became the strategy. It was also the strategy for those row of 6 towers. So they're not 6 the same. There are different architects. And we asked each architect, we had no general plan, as if should they all be rather wide, or should they all be with square windows or whatever. There was one rule, that's the height, 60 meters. And then we asked each architect, well, they're designed per 2, to react towards the former one. And so in this organic, slow way, I think we created something that is more rich, that has more story, and that looks more gradually developed instead of instant development. We have spectacular buildings too, iconic buildings. This one is by Zaha Hadid. It's not my favorite to have this kind of buildings in the city, but it's a kind of proof how this kind of climate of culture of good architecture in Antwerp has been able to attract world-famous architects too. So it's a spectacular building, of course. I'm glad there is one. Surely I'm even more glad there is only one. You need one, not more. I'll skip on that. So we really, when we realized that our, well, just very briefly, when we realized that our limits, or what we felt as a kind of limitation, is in fact our strength, this kind of slow piece-by-piece development, we decided to cultivate it. And for instance, in this area of the Erlandje, there is a lot of land owned by the city, or everything in orange. And instead of bringing it on the market in just one movement, giving it to one developer, we decided to bring it on the market very much phased. So block after block, so that you have a kind of diversity of architecture and diversity of developers too. And even within the block, so this is one of the blocks, we decided to cut it up in 6 parcels and to bring them separately on the market. So 6 competitions with 6 different architects, sometimes even teams of architects, 6 different developers, only for one housing block. The result is this kind of collage. So 4 of them are already designed. These 2 of them, that's another story. And then we realized there were some frictions, of course. Quite difficult to coordinate. One is working over there, one is working over there. They're making both a project, and then when you glue them together, they don't fit. And even that, we realized, well, perhaps that's not really a problem. In the historical city, which has been growing in an organic way, it's everywhere like that. And we think it's a charm, kind of a corner that is a bit strange, facade that is not fitting to the next one. So why not accept it here too, instead of making it smooth and uniform? And so this kind of acceptance of small accidents, smaller ones, there were some other things that didn't fit that were adjusted, so we shouldn't exaggerate, but this kind of integrating small things, small accidents, small faults, small errors in a project, I think it makes them more rich. So these are some images of several facades of the urban block that is being constructed now, nearly finished. Then Brussels. Brussels is something else. So where in Antwerp you had really already a climate that is very much in favor of good architecture. So as a bouwmeester, I could work there really on a high level, kind of very sophisticated way, interesting debates with the politicians, interesting debates with the architects. In Brussels, it's not so much like that. There is not yet that kind of culture for good architecture or urban planning. Brussels is the capital of Belgium. It's larger, double the size. It's something like 1 million, nearly 200,000 inhabitants, on a smaller area than Antwerp. So it's a very dense and compact city. So that means it's a region, but in fact the entire region is highly urbanized. It's a city. Cities in Belgium, you should never conceive of them as, like here or many other places, as a kind of place, and around you have suburbs, and then you have wild nature or the countryside. If you leave the city in Brussels and you drive 20 kilometers, then you're in the next city. If you drive another 20 kilometers, then you're in Antwerp. So in fact, Belgium is one urbanized carpet. So in my personal life, when I was working as a bouwmeester in Antwerp, I kept living in Brussels. And I just commuted every day. It's something like 50 kilometers. It's a 1-hour commute by train or by car. So that means our urban morphology is really dispersion, is sprawl. Everything is urban. Second point, Brussels is very diverse. So Brussels is firstly is a growing city. So in 2005, there were 1 million people. Last 10 years, there was something like 15,000 new inhabitants per year. And so the prognosis for the next 10 years is also growth, another 10,000 people per year that are coming to the city. Part of them is people living in the suburbs and now deciding to go and live in the city. But that's, to be honest, it's a small part. So the major part of the new inhabitants, it's new immigrants, people coming from abroad, often from the Middle East or from Northern Africa or even Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so on. So it means it's not always rich people coming to the city. It's many poor people. And so that means, a second aspect in this diversity of Brussels is that in Brussels is not anymore a Belgian city. Brussels is a very international city. So in Brussels, only one-third of the people have no Belgian nationality. That means they are very recent immigrants. They are not second generation. They are not born here. They have no Belgian nationality. They are foreigners. Only, that's the opposite. Only one-third of the people have parents that are both parents that have been born in Belgium. And so the majority are not in Belgium born, or their parents are not in Belgium born. That means they are children of the immigration of the 1960s. So their parents came from Morocco, from Turkey. They were born here, but they are first generation Belgians. So that means you have a huge diversity. So part of the non-Belgians are Europeans, the people working for the European institutions. Another part are the new immigrants. I'm not very clear on this point, I think, but perhaps I will take myself as an example again. So I'm Belgian. My parents are Belgian. My wife is Belgian. We were born in Belgium. My daughter is born in Belgium. I'm the real minority in my city, especially because I'm Dutch-speaking, and even that, the language is a minority. So at a certain moment in Brussels, there were more illegal Polish people than people like me. So that means we have in Brussels to conceive of our urban population in a totally different way than before. So if we build housing in Brussels, mostly we still think we build housing for people like me. But in fact, that's only a minority. So this kind of social, ethnic complexity in Brussels, that's really one of the main challenges, and that's not easy to pick up in urban planning, I confess, and so on. So that's one of our major challenges. And for me, it's a kind of laboratory of what many, many cities in Europe will encounter in the next couple of years or tens of years. So that's really, for me, that's really important. Brussels is not an easy city to love. It's not always a very beautiful city. It's not mignon, cozy. It's not sweet. It's not like your historical quarter. So you have a lot of, for instance, road infrastructure going straight through. You have a kind of incredible clash between anonymous, abstract European institution buildings and then leftover pieces of traditional urban fabric. But it's especially this kind of lack of classical beauty that I think which is the strength of Brussels. So there again, in the same way the social ethnic diversity is problematic, but it's a challenge and it's a future. We have to deal with it. This kind of non-harmonious urban environments It's problematic, but it's the challenge and it's the future, and we will have to deal with it. So if in Brussels we can deal with this, I think then we can deal with everything everywhere in Europe. So that's what attracts me in working in Brussels too. Just a bit of history, but then I will go. So in Brussels, you should know, architect is an insult. So in the Brussels dialect, if you really want to insult someone, you say schieven architect, so dirty architect. So that's because the architects and urban planners in Brussels have been doing brutal things. It all started in the 19th century with the king, Leopold II, who wanted to make Brussels like Paris. So he made a lot of boulevards, which today are nice environments, a bit like Haussmann in Paris did, but which in those times were quite brutal interventions. Then in the 1930s, 50s, 40s, 50s, they decided we had 2 railway stations in Brussels which were terminus stations. And then they decided to link them, to make partly a tunnel, partly a viaduct. But in any case, they decided to do that not by, in those times, digging a tunnel under the ground, but by putting everything open, making the tunnel and the viaduct, and then afterwards, normally you should cover and repair. Well, that was not always done. So for many, many years, this kind of link between the 2 stations was really a kind of cut in the city. Then came the 1950s, the period of car dominance in Brussels. So a lot of highway infrastructure, a viaduct, were built right into the center. Again, another way of cutting up the city. Entire historic quarters like this one were demolished and replaced by business districts and office buildings with mirror glass, you know, the kind of things. And finally, to complete this story of mistakes, the European institutions. So you can a bad photograph. So this was the traditional urban fabric, 19th century fabric of the Leopold Quarter, where most of the European institutions are. A lot of mansions and individual houses, nice streets and building blocks. These are the scale of the new buildings that have become there, that have really disrupted the area by the scale. And secondly, okay, you could accept the scale, the architectural quality is 0. So another layer of brutal interventions in Brussels. So that means people were not always happy. People started to protest. And then that's the reason why for many, many years, something like last 25 years, urban planning in Brussels has been about repairing, remedy, trying to heal, trying to improve the living quality, life quality in quarters for the inhabitants. So not so much about new big projects, strategic plans, and so on, because in Brussels we had enough of them, and they had proven to be a failure. So please, no big projects, but please, small projects that improve my life, my house in the neighborhood. And so that's very strong. So in Brussels there is a strong tradition of doing, in every quarter, small interventions, making life better. Sometimes, so with a lot of participation of local inhabitants. So for the people who might know, this is the tradition of the contrat de quartier, so working contracts in quarters, so doing investments in housing quarters. With a lot of fine examples, housing projects that bring a new typology of housing, that try to create a small park, schools, fine architecture, making schools and making buildings on difficult places, on a corner, vertical schools and so on. leftover spaces, those kind of spaces that were wasteland for many years, well, trying to fill them up to repair. Making green spaces, also in difficult spaces. For instance, here on the inside of an urban block. So going from one street above, down the hill, that's down the hill you see over here, to the other side of the urban block. And so really amidst of the backyards of a lot of housing. So trying to squeeze in some space to breathe. Or a last example, for me the kind of perfect example of these kind of typically Brussels projects. So you had a roundabout, there is a railway here, down. It was of course without a bridge, and you had two kind of leftover spaces. Of course you couldn't use anything because too small, how do you get there, and so on. And so in the Contrat de Quartier there was an architect who proposed, well, if we would build a bridge, then at least those two areas are connected. Then it's a bit larger. You can walk from one end to the other end, and you can walk, you can cross the square in that way, which is for pedestrian then a quicker way. And then if we would widen up that bridge a bit, and then a bit to something with a slope, something with stairs, then we can use it, or children can use it to play, or a skater can do something over there. So let's try to turn this kind of hopelessly infrastructural space into a public space, into a place where you want to go. And so then they added this bridge and so on. So typical example of small interventions, wise, intelligent, beautiful, some architectural ambition, some innovation also in the engineering work in this case. It's a very fine engineer who made this. But working on a very local scale, and then improving life quality in the neighborhoods. So I have a lot of respect for this tradition. I was not involved. But I think now in Brussels, we need something else. We need to work on a more global scale, comprehensive scale of the city itself. So now, after 25 years of small interventions and improving the quality of life in the neighborhoods, we should have the guts to start working on large strategic projects again. And so that's why I was very happy that the new government in 2014 decided to define in Brussels 10 strategic areas where they will do more development and where they have the ambition to create new neighborhoods with enough architectural and urbanistic quality. So working on another scale. The main one is this one. So this is Brussels, this is the historical city center, and there's a canal going from one side of Brussels to the other side, going towards Wallonia and going to Antwerp and the sea on the north. And so this canal in Brussels, the canal area, is now the main strategic area for urban renewal in Brussels. As a Bouwmeester, I'm working a lot on that area. Working on that area means, of course, that automatically you work on the level of the region, of the city as a whole, because it goes from one side to the other side. So you cannot escape. So it's not about doing small local punctual projects here. It's doing about perhaps also small projects, but a lot of them, but from a global point of view within the framework of one overall vision. Working on the canal is also, but perhaps that's too, it's in fact working on the topography of Brussels, because Brussels, there was a river in Brussels, here, in the valley. So Brussels is a bit like this. But the river was covered in the 19th century. It's in fact a sewage now. But the canal, of course, is on more or less on the same place as the river in the valley. So it's also working on the topography, and I think it's useful when we work on the canal that we try to make the experience of this topography more visible. so that people can read the city not just as something that is like that, but as a city where there is a valley and where there is a reason why the canal is in the valley. It looks like that. So this is from a new housing tower at the canal. If you look that side, the historical city is over there. There's another tower at the south station over there. Along the canal, you have very fine industrial buildings of the 19th century. You have also, there has already been some redevelopment in the 1980s, postmodern architecture, banks, mostly offices. If you look on the same spot and if you turn over to the other side, then you have this kind of view. And then you can see that along the canal in Brussels, there is still a lot of industry. So here we are something like 15 minutes walking of the Grand Place, the touristical hotspot really in the heart of the city. And you have still a concrete plant here, kind of distribution center, all kind of industrial activities along the canal. So there is a lot of potential. So the canal is, of course, cutting through Brussels. This is a density map. It's no surprise. Red is more dense, blue is less dense. So in the city center, it's more dense. But there are areas along the canal where it is not dense at all. But the canal is also a kind of social division in the city. So it's a spatial division in the city, because you have to cross the canal. But it's also the area where the poor live. So blue is more rich, green is less rich. On the right, it's the place where the unemployed live. So red is the people with no jobs. Here there are hardly any people without jobs. So Brussels is a bit like Detroit, you could say, like this kind of American cities, where the heart of the city, in fact, is poor, and the suburb is rich. In many other European cities, it has already been reversed. If you want to live in the center of Paris, you have to pay a lot. The rich live in the center, the poor live in the outskirts. Brussels is a bit like one of those American cities. So working on the canal is working on the topography of Brussels. Working on the canal is also working on the social division in Brussels. It's a quite dual city. And perhaps that's most clear in this drawing that was made by Brussels think tank, architecture workroom. So in blue, you can see the canal over here. Blue is what they call the thinkers. Red is what they call the makers. Thinkers means high qualified jobs. Office workers. Offices are here. The people working in the offices, they are living in these areas. Factories, economic activity, productive economy is over here. The low qualified people, they are living here. It's the people who make things and the people who think things. White collar, blue collar. Brussels is quite a dual city. So that's why in 2012 there was decided to make a plan canal, a global vision. It was made by the French urban planner Alexandre Chemetov. There are three main objectives. The first two, they are very good, very wise, but normal. So the first one is, because we have many new inhabitants in Brussels, so we have to build new housing. It's quite evident in this area of the canal. There are a lot of land still available because the industry has left, so we can build a lot of housing over there. So in the canal area, we will build a lot of housing. The second one is about this duality. Now it's a kind of rupture in the city, a barrier between two parts of the city. The objective is to overcome this and to make it into a place of centrality. So linking the two parts of the city, making new public spaces that improve the quality of life there. So there will be built a lot of new pedestrian bridges over the canal to link the both areas. There are several parks, public spaces planned along the canal. This is happening in many cities, and it's, we could say, quite general things. If you need housing, you have to build housing, and you have to do it where there is nothing built. And who could be against better public space and trying to solve barriers in a city? I'm sure somewhere in your plan in Tallinn you have this kind of things as well. But the third element, this one, sorry, is very specific. So in Brussels they decided that there is some economic activity still over there. You've seen it, smaller industrial activity. So the large factories they have left. But there are some smaller factories, sometimes in the recycling business, sometimes normal jobs like a plumber, or where you go when you have to repair your car, or you have to replace your tires, so winter tires, summer tires, these kind of things. Well, a lot of these kind of ordinary economic activities are still in that area. What we've seen in many, many developments, waterfront developments in Europe, that these kind of activities are pushed out by new housing projects. Because, of course, land prices pushes them out. Well, in Brussels, the idea is, let's try not to do that, because we think this kind of economic activity belongs to the city. I will tell you in a minute about that. And secondly, because we need jobs for low qualified people. So if we start pushing out these kind of activities, we will even have more unemployment. So let's try to do something that has not done before, urban redevelopment, new apartments, but we try to keep economic activities, and so we try to combine both, even if that's not evident, because there could be a lot of complaints. It's not easy to combine new housings with PMEs, small factories, a repair shop. They make a lot of noise, they start working early in the morning, these kind of things. But we think that makes part of city life as well. So now we are in an operational phase. I'll show you first a standard thing. So because I will tell you now about this idea of the productive city. That's exactly this third point of the Plan Canal. But apart from that, of course, we have a lot of, one could say, conventional urban renewal and housing projects as well that are sometimes very interesting, like this one. So that is, the canal is over here. This is a 19th century entrepot and former train station for goods. This one as well. Beautiful site, incredibly beautiful. It was like this some years ago. So all of the development was on the other side of the canal, offices, residential tower. The buildings I just shown you were here. It's becoming like this now. So in the middle there will be a park. The industrial buildings of the 19th century will be kept. There will be a new office building that is being constructed here and then there will be, I organized with so the canal is here, the industrial historical buildings are here, the new office building is there. This will be a new park that leads towards another part of the town, and we organized an architectural competition on this side for 800 new dwellings. Looks like that. I won't explain you. Quite subtle and respectful for the historical environment. Quite interesting for me because I was able to organize a competition with a private developer, which was something new in Brussels, and because it was also an international team that has won English architects, so foreign architects working in Brussels. That's not happening often enough, so I was quite glad for that too, that there is a kind of fresh blood of architects coming to Brussels. But then, the productive city. This is the same canal, a bit further on. For me, this is an urban image. This is an image of the city. That's really urban. It's urban because you have traditional 19th century housing, of course, and it's urban because you have a concrete plant. So I don't think that if we redevelop this case, that the concrete plant should be moved. I think it should stay there. This is what we decided in the Plan Canal. And it's urban because the concrete plant is an urban activity. So in Brussels, you have a lot of building projects, building sites. And you will always have them, because it's always kind of perpetuum mobile, so they demolish an office building and they rebuild it and so on. It will always, there will be construction activity. And you need concrete. So we will always need concrete. The need of concrete is an urban need, because it's in the city that you need concrete. It's not in the countryside that they need a lot of concrete. And the concrete has to be brought into the city. So in this case, it's boats, ships that bring the sand and the cement along the water. And here, both are mixed, and then in this kind of special trucks, it's brought to the building site. Because concrete has to be fresh and kept on moving and so on, you can't have the cement factory too much outside of the city, because then it takes too long to bring it to the building sites, and there can be a lot of traffic problems and so on, and there is a risk that the concrete is not fluid anymore when you need it on the building site. So it should be quite close to the building sites. Secondly, I prefer that they bring cement and sand by boat instead of by trucks. It's more sustainable. Less trucks in the city. That's a good point for the livability, for the life quality in the city. And so that's why we think that this program should stay. Of course, not like this. So we think, okay, you can stay. We will not make fancy apartments here, the waterfront. We will not make a park here. We will do it in other places. We will not keep industry everywhere, but in some places we think we should keep that industry, on condition that you want to do some effort to integrate yourself in the urban environment. So to reduce the nuisances, perhaps to do some architecture work that it looks more nice, to organize yourself in a more compact way that you don't need too much space, and then you can stay. This productive economy in the city makes part of the city. It's the backside of the city. If the front side is consumption, the backside is production, is logistics, it's distribution. If the front side is urban, shops and new buildings and entertainment, then the backside of the front side, of course, is as urban. Both could go together. This has become quite fashionable. You know, perhaps these kind of images. Production in the city, manufacturing things in town. It's also a kind of hipster thing. I guess you know, perhaps you have some local bikes that are produced here, especially the very beautiful ones with only one gear, fixies, fixed bikes. And so the ones you put them in your living room. We have them in Brussels too. We have a local bike production. We have chocolate everywhere, artisanal craft chocolate. We have craft breweries. You have them too, I guess. So there's kind of small breweries with a special taste, made here, delivered to the bars here. This kind of local production, very hipster again. So we think that's all right. I'm not against it. But I think there is another kind of economic activity that we should provide room for in the city, something else too than elegant women that are holding a hammer and making a violin or something like that. So we think work in the city, it's also something like that. Dirty work, grease, noise. But you need it. If you have a car in the city and you want to replace your tires, it's quite frustrating. You have to drive 20 kilometers out of the city to find on the outskirts of the city somewhere a car repair shop and then come back. If you're a plumber in Molenbeek and you live in the city and you want to work in the city, and there's work enough in the city because the plumber of Molenbeek is repairing the houses in the city, but that plumber in Molenbeek, actually, he has to drive out of the city too in the morning to go to a kind of storage of spare parts somewhere out of the city, and then come back to do the repair jobs in the city. And that's because we didn't provide space anymore for this kind of storage and small plumbers and small factories and small workshops, this kind of urban economy within the city itself. So that's a problem, and that's why we think that in future new urban neighborhoods, you should integrate this kind of economic activities as well, because they are urban and they make the city really mixed. Mixity, mixed urban neighborhoods, it's not just about adding some bars and restaurants to a neighborhood. It's also about adding workspaces, spaces for smaller workshops. Some innovating small factories are actually located within the urban fabric of Brussels itself, and we want to keep them there along the canal. So in Brussels, it is already on the political agenda. That's easy. You don't have to convince the minister anymore. He believes in it. We have some spatial planning instruments. So in some areas along the canal, we reserved area for those kind of functions. Or in those areas, we allow developers to build new houses on former industrial land, on condition that they add something like 10% of these kind of economic activities as well. So they are forced to combine both. And then they can do it. We have a lot of land along the canal that is owned publicly. So that means that we can decide not as a public authority, but as a landowner. That makes you more powerful. If the political will is like that, they can decide to use the land also for economic activity and not just for residential development. We organize competitions. I know I have some more minutes. I can go quickly now. In something like 5 minutes, I will finish. Because, okay, we can agree on the political level that we should have this kind of both functions in the area. But it's easier said than done, because it's not always easy to combine both. How can you do that in one building? And how can you control that one is not complaining about the other one? Inhabitants are complaining about the noise, and the small companies that are over there, well, they fear that someday they will be pushed out because they won't have an environmental permit anymore. So they prefer not to stay in the city, but to be sure and to be out of the city. So how can you, by inventing architectural typology, reconcile both elements? So there have been architectural competitions like this one, where the Port Authority makes new industrial sheds to combine a lot of smaller do-it-yourself companies, and so giving them also a clear presence in the city. I think those kind of economic activity can be visible in the city. You should be proud of it instead of pushing it away. There was a recent competition organized also by Brussels, where a basement, a socle of smaller workshops in the food industry is combined with social housing and student housing on top. So sometimes it's superposition, like here, the housing, the workshop, and then the backyard for delivering goods, with a kind of canopy, which is very much focusing on absorbing noise, acoustic measures on the underside, and then a green roof on above, on the other side, sorry. But sometimes it's also not superposition, but juxtaposition. So this is not so much visible here. This is a facade with small workshops, a new small street, no cars, and on the other side of the street, you have a new housing project. So how can we conceive of this kind of street that we accept it as urban? So you leave your house, you're in the street, public space, and on the other side of the street, you have a row of small workshops. So it's also about the kind of mentality shift that we should accept that these kind of programs belong to the city. There are other things I will research by design. Perhaps I will skip on that and show you only one. So this is a typical thing what the bouwmeester can do, that is financing pilot projects. So these are projects not intended to be built immediately, because they are not feasible in an economic way and so on, but providing some ideas, trying to influence commercial parties, trying to help invent new architectural solutions. It's a typical thing for a bouwmeester. And so one of them was a team that explored, can't we stack all of those economic activities? Because there were examples like Lloyd's in London, which is in fact a free span space because the structure is on the outside, so that means you could use it for offices, but of course you could use it for production, productive economy as well. So no columns, that's always better. There are historical examples, and there is a recent one built by Borreti in France. So they explored how should you do that, and what should you do with elevators, and what about the fire escapes, and all those kind of things. And then they made an image for a kind of productive tower, so a stack of productive activity, which is also a kind of statement, because here this is along the canal, of course. You could see 3 waves of high-rise in Brussels. We had the era of high-rise office towers. We are having now the period of high-rise residential towers. But perhaps in some years we will have a kind of era of productive towers. So we think in Brussels that productive economy is part of the city and can be part of the image of the city. A bit last statement. There was a time that kids in the city didn't know anymore where the milk comes from. So you had to explain that it's not coming from the supermarket, but that there is a cow behind. And so that's why we had urban farms in the city where they explained it, and then you could go with school. I went with school, and then, oh, whoa, it's work like that, this kind of thing. We are quite urban in Belgium. So my fear is that we are now, when we are pushing out all manufacturing out of the city, that kids don't know anymore that things are made, that you just don't buy them and throw away, but that somewhere somebody is making them, is manufacturing them. And that this kind of jobs, low qualified jobs, hand work, that they are useful, these jobs, and that they deserve to be visible in the city too, and that they are urban, and that they have a right to be present in the city. That's about productive city. Thanks to you. If there is time left, I'm ready to answer questions on any of the subjects, whether it's very much on policy of bouwmeester or whether it's on productive city, as you like.
Thank you so much, Russell. We are running short in time, I have plenty of questions, but if we could take just one or two quick ones. Yes, please.
If it's a hard or soft intervention. And I'm thinking about Jona Friedman's Villa Spatiale, if you're familiar with the idea.
Yeah, with the idea.
I was always worried that it's never going to be built. But what you're talking about in these projects, that the ground floor is for a workshop and for kind of city life, and over that can this mobile architecture, popular architecture happen. What do you think about it with your expertise?
Well, to be honest, this building, of course, it's in the Jona Friedman stage. That means it hasn't been built either. And so probably it won't be built because it's not feasible. So I think in architecture there are also limits to flexibility. So architecture is in fact very much tectonic and in-earth soils. You can't change always everything into everything. So, but perhaps I'm more an urban planner than an architect. And so what is for me important in this kind of flexible or hard and soft debate is also on the level of an urban plan. There have been made too many master plans that have been conceived of as a kind of final vision that should be realized entirely. So I don't believe in that. I believe that master planning should be more like what is in French called a plan guide, a guidance plan, so a plan that helps you to follow the right direction, but doesn't fix everything. So my metaphor was in fact more on the urban planning level. But Friedman is wonderful drawings, but I'm also no nonsense and I'm into practice, and I know that Friedman never was built, and there's a reason for that. So.
Anyone else?
So I have a question about architectural competitions. Maybe you a little bit explain about architectural quality, how you keep this, what is your steps, and do you have some rule or how you control the cost afterwards, how the construction cost?
Yeah.
To why this kind works that not feasible to build?
Yeah, some clients are really afraid of architectural competitions because they then think we will have crazy proposals, the bouwmeester will sustain them, support them, and then afterwards the budget will explode. There are examples of that. On the other hand, I think for me it's part of the preparation. As a client, you should be able to fix a budget and to be honest about it and well done. And then if it's well done, as a bouwmeester, I will support that. And so we had this problem many years ago, so that architectural competitions went into all kind of directions, and afterwards clients were complaining and so on. But part of the bouwmeester job is installing a bit of rigor, being strict, clear, and also a bit of trust. And so after a while, I think architects understood. And now there's a kind of, you could say, calm climate about competition. So we don't have so many competitions where the budget explodes afterwards. We don't have crazy proposals. It's more formatted. So it proves that I think you can professionalize the whole system of competitions, and then it works well. Yeah, the budget is fixed, but also a typical mistake, sometimes it's the fault of the architect, because he proposes something that is too expensive and he doesn't want to tell you that during the competition. So that's why we often, for instance, we have a criterion which is not the budget, because if the budget in the brief of the competition is €1 million, you know that all of the architects will have 999,990. So we ask an estimate of the project, and we have a criterion which is about the credibility of the estimate. So not the estimate is in right English word, I think, because you know that the estimate will be 1 million euro, but you can check the credibility. Sometimes you know that it's not possible for 1 million euro. You just see it. And so this criterion helps. It's a kind of auto correction of the architects too. They know they will be judged on their credibility about the budget, and then automatically they adapt already their project. Another that's for the naughty architects, but you have also the naughty clients. You have a lot of clients that have a lot of dreams, and then the program, especially with public clients, is composed. One department says, I want that, and the other department says that, and then the director comes along and says, yeah, but I want this, and so on. And so the program explodes, but the budget is never adapted. In many cases, the budget is still the budget that was decided 2 years ago by the government, and that was sometimes underestimated because, well, you know, it's more easy to have a decision of the government on a budget of 1 million euro than 2 million euro. So you say it's 1 million euro, and you hope that afterwards, then I will be able to add. So that's wrong too. So sometimes as a bouwmeester, when in the very beginning of a competition, we do kind of check of the program, then we say to the client, well, what you ask at the architect and what the budget you provide, that's really not in proportion. So he cannot give you a building that corresponds to the budget. So you should or make the budget higher or cut in the program. So it's on both sides. So, but this is this kind of professionalization of the system of competitions. So after it's not what many people in Belgium have been doing, so it's not especially my merit, but it's a kind of, because you have a lot of bouwmeesters, because you have a lot of responsibility then among the clients, among the architects, so you create a climate which is more, well, rational then.
Thank you so much. We have a small present for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thanks to you.
Thank you all for coming.
And support the idea of a bouwmeester in Tallinn and in Estonia.